Good morning, everyone. I'm Pauline. This is Patty.
Hey, how you doing?
Good, how are you?
Yeah, good. Short week.
Yeah, it is 4-day week in Australia.
So, pretty nice. Means this webinar came around sooner than normal. Had slightly less time to prepare, but that's all right because today's webinar is not so much about what we have to offer you, but it's what you have to ask us.
Yeah, it's about your questions and our answers.
Yeah, exactly. We do these sessions every now and again to just have a really direct, I suppose, line to us with any questions that you want, so that we can answer them then and there on the spot, and so you can hear it straight from the horse's mouth.
Yeah, and if some of them that we can't answer, we possibly talk to you after the webinar as well. So nothing gets missed, really. So any feedback, any of your questions, we take them seriously.
Yeah, exactly. It's all in the name of transparency, which is something a word we love around here. But I think it's good to keep in mind as we go throughout the session, and I've mentioned this in the comments just there, and Lou says it seems blurry. Is anyone else having issues with the video? Or is it just Lou? Super blurry.
Oh, yeah.
Jeez. Well, that's no good.
Let's see.
Well, the good news with that is that this is the last time we'll be using Demio.
I was going to say that.
Sorry, I stole your thunder.
It's okay. The last time of using Demio, so we're moving to Lifetime next month.
Yeah, so we'll be using a new webinar tool, which we've tested a couple times, and it's far superior in terms of its quality. So we'll push through with this one. There'll be a recording of it up later if any of you want to catch it, or if it's too hard to kind of get through, you can watch that one there. But we'll push through now, and hopefully in future we won't have any more streaming issues.
We're recording this session as well, right? We're recording this one. Yeah. The sound's a bit static as well.
Yeah.
Okay, let's push through. All right, cool. So, Patty, what was the first question that we're going to talk about?
So I think we're thinking about these questions that we've asked people to submit. We're thinking about how the product's working. We kind of want to get into, anything that you might not understand that might seem obvious. And one of the first questions that we've got kicking us off today is a pretty basic one. It's Streamtime 101, but if you don't know it, then you're going to have a hard time getting your head around Streamtime. But it's understanding the difference between an item and a task. So, Polly, do you want to explain what the difference between an item and a task is?
Of course, I would love to. It is a basic question, but we get it a lot. So it's okay to ask this question if you're quite new to Streamtime. So don't feel bad if you don't understand it straight away. So
let's start with an item, maybe.
Yeah. So the items are your deliverables. So the services, your line items that will live in your quote. Your team will be tracking time against those items as the job progresses, whilst the tasks are very lightweight sub-items. So the items consist of mini tasks that you could create for your team and communicate to them with what needs to be done for that specific item. So your team can simply just mark it as complete. So those are the checklist items, but also the task can be your to-do as well. So when it comes to planning a job, you're creating items within that job, so you're adding those deliverables. But those items can be split into different to-dos that you can allocate to yourself on your to-do screen. That's where you will be getting organized and tracking time under the right projects. So you could see clearly that today we've got this design item that we've added into Patty's day, and this design is actually a to-do that the item consists of. So if you are tracking time and if you're dragging one of these to-dos into done, the item doesn't get completed. You're actually just tracking time under that item.
Yeah, exactly. So you'll see up here, this is referring to the parent item, this design development, and I can see that there's 36 hours and 15 minutes remaining to be worked on. When you go back to the job, you'll actually notice that design development all up has 44 hours and there's 7 hours and 45 minutes being worked on done so far. So that 36 hours 15 is showing us the remaining amount. And exactly, when you start to work on this, you're going to notice those hours crunching down as well. So each of those tasks is pushing towards the end goal of that parent item.
Yeah, exactly. And that leads us to actually the third question, but I think they're all connected. How does plan time relate to my to-dos and the budget? So plan time is essentially your goal, your end goal. So if you do track overtime, it might affect the job budget itself. So it's important to, whoever it is, planning a job in your team, adding the realistic plan time to those items, because that's your end goal at the end. And as Patty just explained, if you are tracking time against an item, your time will reduce on the right-hand side. So this is what you've got left to work on.
Exactly. I'm sorry about the screen taking a while to come up there. I think that was, Demio was flaking on us a little bit there. But,
maybe they know
we
we're
can see
leaving,
it now.
so just like...
Sabotage our last one. So yes, we were just referring to the tasks here on your to-do screen and the parent items that you can see here in the item sidebar, which are coming from the job. So while we're on the topic of items, Polly, maybe do you want to explain what the importance of status on items are?
Yeah, sure. So we do have three default statuses in Streamtime. So in play, paused, or completed. So the paused one is yellow. It means the item is not live yet. You could build your job with paused items as well, but your team members, they won't be able to see it on their to-do screen. So they don't need to be confused. They don't need to know about it yet.
And you can actually control all the statuses of the job up here.
That's pretty new. Is that kind of new? Yeah, 3 months. Then we've got in play, the item which is in play. It means self-explanatory. Your team is already tracking time against it. It's a live item. And we've got a completed item, which means it will disappear from the to-do screen altogether because it has been completed. So you know exactly what has been done for that job and what is the next thing to do.
And you see that we can actually set these statuses at a team member level as well underneath an item. So we can set an item status, which is going to dictate that status for the whole item for all team members. But I can get really granular with who I want to kind of see those items as well. So for example, if I can see that Sarah here's worked 16 hours and 45 minutes, we're already over budget and maybe I need to make sure that she doesn't track more time. And so I want to put this one into complete. I can see that there are actually to-dos already created, tasks, which Sarah's probably created in advance or someone has scheduled for her. What I want to do is actually mark this as complete and remove those tasks to make sure that there's no more work being done, because we've hit budget, we're going to need to get more scope approved from the client before that one goes ahead. So that's a good use case for actually taking more control of the job and putting things into play or pause. And the other version of that is maybe Michael's still working on this, but we actually know that we haven't hit that work yet and we do need to get some more scope approved. Instead of marking it as complete, which is more of a final kind of stage, let's say all the work's being done and yes, it went over, but we just need to have it finished. We could mark it as complete. But let's say we actually might need to keep working on this upon the client's approval. We might want to keep this one in pause. I'm just saying, Michael, hold back on working on that for the moment. He won't see it in his item sidebar from the to-do screen, and he won't really be prompted to create tasks for him. We'll kind of hide those pause tasks. But once the job's ready to get going again, we can just come back in and put it back into play for him.
Exactly. And if you are working from the to-do screen, say you're a designer, you're working on a task, you could complete your task, your slot within that task by completing your to-do on the to-do sidebar. So Patty, do you want to just take us through the to-do screen? And if I've done my side, my part of the project, maybe this concept development for wine labels in 2020, I want to complete my part. And this will complete my part within the job plan itself. If someone else has been allocated to the job, they will still have it in place. So it doesn't mean that I'm completing the whole item for everybody.
And you can see those recently completed items down the bottom here. You can click on the job name, you can go back to the job, and exactly as you kind of said there, Polly, against my name here, we've completed this concept development where I can see that, in fact, Michael and Danielle are still going with this.
Cool. There's another question there for you, Patty. What is the difference between the job timeline and the schedule? So this question we get quite a lot.
This is a good question. Yeah. So back in November, we released the job timeline. It lives up here, right next to the job details. And so it's a new area in this job window where you can see the timeline of all parts of the job, all items and phases, and also any milestones that you might have, which is also a new feature that we introduced here. The job timeline is really useful for setting and planning project dates. It's really intuitive and easy for me to grab each of these tasks here, or these items, I should say. You can see that these are just coming from the job details page, and they're referring to these dates here. So it's really easy for me to kind of click in and drag these about. I can actually click these open and look at what's planned in terms of the hours, what's been worked on so far, and of course the status of that item as well.
So it's a visual way of viewing your job.
Yeah, exactly.
And focusing on one job, I guess.
Exactly. And you might come here to plan the dates of a project and shift them when they might change. Often you might do this at the start of the job, just as the quote's been approved. The client wants to get a grasp on the timings of the job. So this is where you'll come in to plot it out. You might even come up here to the create button and generate a timeline PDF, which you can do quite easily. And we've got a summary there and a timeline. So the timeline is a more, it's the visual representation of what you can see on the screen. A summary is a bit more detailed, listing all of the milestones, when they're going to be hit, and the dates of the project too. So if the client wants those, you can provide them there. But what you're doing really is planning the dates of the project, whereas within the schedule, you're operating more at a task-based level. So we're actually tasking out time for the team to kind of track their work and get things done. So the schedule is a bit more, the job timeline is a bit more high level than the schedule is, where in the to-do schedule here, I can see everyone's to-do screen in one place, and I can actually control when these things are going to happen on a certain day, and they've got time allocated to these tasks too, and I can plan these in too.
Yeah, exactly. And the job schedule is also focusing on all the jobs that you've got in your studio perhaps. So the to-do schedule, you're looking at your tasks, your team tasks, but the job schedule is focusing on all your jobs, not the only one job that you're looking at from the timeline view.
Yeah, exactly. Michelle had a good question there. In the schedule, can you arrange the tasks in order of when you want them done? You can in the individual to-do lists. The answer to that question is no, and the reason for that is just because there are rules around how these stack across multiple days. So, it's more of a technical limitation than anything, but when you have these tasks painted or dragged across multiple days, which is something you're able to do in the schedule to make it easy to plan work in, those rules mean that you can't drag and rearrange these. If you do want to prioritize a task or kind of express, priority to a team member, you can add a note by clicking open the task, and you'll see here in this description field. We can ask Patty to, hey, can you please make sure we have this stuff in there. Thanks. That's very good.
And it's up to your team member, up to Patty to decide and move it into his first thing to do on the day from his to-do list.
Yeah, exactly. By default, you will have those notes surface as the hierarchy here, which we can control up the top too. You can rearrange the order of those, and it means that when there's a note on those tasks, we'll surface that to the top. So it's really clear for you to see. But there's no actual set priority when it comes to the order of how these to-dos are stacked. Some people like to use the bottom, the yellow task, as the most immediate, the next task to work on. Other people might use it at the top, but there's no defined set way about that as well. So,
Awesome. So
maybe
colors.
good lead into this question.
Yeah, perfect. So Streamtime Streamtime colors. So job colors, we've got our own job colors, and how does the color coding work in Streamtime? So we do have our 3 colors that actually more than 3 colors on the to-do screen, but we have 3 colors for the job status. So they're all based on your item status, right? So if the job is all in pause, all the items are in pause.
Mm-hmm.
If the job is in play, most of your items are in play. So the job will classify as
timeline is actually a good place to see that.
Exactly.
This one to just so you can see those all together. Cool.
Yeah. So on this screen, you could clearly see what has been done so far, what is it working on right now, and what they haven't started. So those are the 3 colors that we showcase in Streamtime. The questions that we get all the time is, why can't we personalize it?
Yeah, I mean, there are just set ways around how we use color in the system, and at the moment, in relation to how jobs are kind of tracking, it's really linked to the status of that job. You'll see colors elsewhere, like within the jobs list. When you do hover and kind of roll down this list, you'll see the Streamtime rainbow, which is also what you'll see in your to-do screen, and when these jobs are stacked. Now, there's no meaning behind these colors. It's simply just to add a bit more interest, I think, to the page, especially in the to-do screen as well. We do have colors associated with these tasks, but there's no meaning behind them other than it being indicative of those being the tasks that you're working on today. Now, we have, we get this question all the time. People want to color-coded jobs so that they can, group them together or know which one's which by client, all sorts of things. But the thing is, when it comes to color, it's such a big conversation, such a big task to change the way color works, or even introduce a new way of thinking about color in the product, when currently it's so linked to the statuses. So if we introduce a new way of working, we have to be really careful about how we do it and how we communicate that. So the job in itself of looking at color is massive, and I know that that's something our design team are interested in doing at some point, but it's not currently being looked at, and currently the color is working just in relation to status.
Yeah, it's a big task.
Yeah.
Another question that we get all the time is that some days I've got a lot of tasks on my to-do screen and they just don't fit in one column. Is there a way to extend it somehow? That's a bit of a trick there. I'm not sure, most of you should know that, but you could actually drag this black line down to view all of your to-dos for the week or for the day, or to view all of your done tasks for the week. Exactly. Which is great. You could drag it down, and if you like to work from this kind of view, it's perfect for you to then get organized and build up your day. Hopefully not a 13-hour day, but you could see every single to-do and the job that this to-do is related to.
Exactly. So they're going to keep squishing up there. And another thing you can do, if you do, based on what's most important on that to-do for you to see, like we said before, you can reorder the hierarchy of these. So if the job name is most important for you, you can actually drag that to the top so you can see it. Or in fact, you can hide it. So if there are other pieces of information on that to-do which are causing confusion, or being misleading, then you can just turn them off completely to condense what you see there.
On that note as well, lots of people ask us about where they could see the time that they actually tracked for the day or for the week without leaving the to-do screen. So that's also a little trick there. So you could hover over the time to do and done time on the bottom right corner. This is your mini timesheet, I guess, just for yourself. So you could see at a glance on how much work you've done so far this week and what you've got left to do for the week. So obviously you don't want to overwork and you don't want to do more than 38 hours. 40 hours is okay, but you could take a glance and take a look at it at any time of the week to see how you're doing.
Nice one. Well, I thought you were going to keep going.
No. I thought the same, but
Cool. So next is talking about kind of best practice, and when we're looking at our team's work lists, what is the best way to kind of do that, Polly? We've got certain account managers, and I want to see the jobs that they're working on. What's going to be the best way for me to do that?
The team's work list. Okay, cool. So there are a few ways you could do it. You could look at different areas of Streamtime too. What we like to recommend is to look at the job list first. So you could create a custom report, your favorite report of your jobs that your team is currently working on, your wish list. Paulina's job. So what I'm doing now, what Patty's doing now, he's looking at only jobs that I'm looking after based on the job label, Paulina. So you could label your job based on who is an account manager of that project. So this way you could then use that label to report on only the jobs that I'm looking after. If you wanted to see all jobs that your team is working on, you don't have to include that label. You could even look at the to-do schedule as well and see who is working on what project this week and how busy they are, whether they need help. This is the perfect way for you guys to sit down on a Monday morning and talk about your weeks and communicate.
And one other place that we see people doing this as well is priorities. And now it's not to say that there's one of these ways is better than the other. They'll kind of show you different things in different ways. So whatever works for you is more kind of what we're getting at. You've got options. But the studio whip here is, just showing us at a really high level the different status of all of these jobs throughout the studio. So this is really high level. Now, I have seen in other instances, people will have a whip list like this, but instead of statuses in these columns, they've actually got team member names set up, and they'll just put all of the jobs that team member is working on at the moment into that list. So they can see who's working on what at any point in time.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool.
What is the best way to use my to-do sidebar? We kind of touched base on that a little bit.
Yeah, sorry, I skipped that one.
Yeah,
I thought you answered it already.
Well, I was very confused. Thanks. Well, jumping back in the to-do screen, there's a way you could use your to-do sidebar and organize yourself. So if you do need to snooze some of the items, so some of the items that you don't have to work on them just yet. You don't want to see them on your to-do list. You just want to snooze them until it's time for you to start working on it. So what Patty is doing, he's snoozing it for another week. If you want to, you could see all your snoozed items on the top. So you could push them back if needed. You could also complete your items, your tasks on the to-do sidebar, so you know that this has been done. You don't have to look at it again, and you could move on to a new task. So I'm completing it, perfect. Or there is an item that is going to live there forever, all the time. Perhaps that's your annual leave item, so it's an internal job. I want to snooze it forever. I don't want to see it. It's not an actual task. I can search for it when I'm ready to go on holidays and book out my time. But right now, I don't have to see it, so I'm snoozing it forever. That way, I'm getting rid of this unwanted task. And this way, I'm organizing. Exactly. And as you could see, as you know already, we are sorting out your items based on the due dates. So we're prioritizing your task for you. And then it's up to you to decide on how you like to stay organized with them.
Cool. So what's the best way for my team to track non-billable time against a job?
Cool. Am I answering this question?
Yeah.
All right, cool. So if you do like to track non-billable time, there are a few ways you could do it. So you could either have non-billable jobs altogether where you could label them non-billable or internal, and that's where your team will be tracking time. Alternatively, you could potentially create a non-billable item within a job where your team knows that this is the time that you're not billing your client. So having a NB or non-billable in the name of an item, so your team know which item to track time against. Non-billable design. Yeah. Perfect. So this way, when it comes to invoicing, you don't need to select that item and bill for it.
Exactly. So you could come up here, create an invoice. Let's say you're using a job plan. You would just come and, Okay, it's not actually there. It's got nothing on it. But let's say there's maybe $500 worth of work on it. We come up here, invoice using the job plan, and then untick it when we're selecting what we're invoicing.
Yeah, exactly. If you do have a non-billable job, there's also a good way to label them, as I just said, so you can then exclude that label from your profitability reporting or include it on your non-billable time when it comes to reporting.
Awesome. And let's say we wrapped up a job and it's been paid and it's completed. What's the best thing for me to do next?
Yeah, that's a great question, Patty. What the best practice here is once you get your payment for the job, once you know it's been paid, you can archive the job straight away. So you complete it. Yeah, so the job gets completed, the payment is made, the money is in your bank account. Don't have to worry about it anymore. You can archive the job and move on to a new project.
And what does archiving a job do?
Well, it just gets rid of your job from your good list, obviously, and it makes sure that this job you don't have to actually worry about it anymore, and you don't have to track time against it, and it just sits in the archived area, so you don't have to include it in your reports anymore. You could pull it back in play if you need to, if something has been missed, but it's just there in Streamtime. It didn't get deleted. It's just sitting in your archive area. So you don't have to include it as Patty is just showing.
You'll notice that by default, we actually exclude archived jobs from your reports. It's also good to keep in mind if you are doing reporting over a date range, which might include some archived jobs, then you might want to include those too. But by default, we'll remove them because we think of this list, the jobs list as a wick list, we're going to show you the most relevant information.
Exactly, and it declutters your list too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Nice one. All right. We've got one more question here, and then we'll go through a couple that I've noticed pop up in the chat today. And the final question that we've got is about what happens to product feedback when it gets submitted to us. So we have a public-facing roadmap, which you're probably aware of. Oh, I can't actually open it here without my thing. But we do have a public-facing roadmap, which has a whole bunch of things. There might be functionality, there might be features, there might be user stories, but they're all coming from you. A lot of that, everything that kind of fills up that roadmap is based on feedback that we've received from you. Now, whenever we have a conversation with you through the chat window here or over email, when we do find a user story that's related to a problem, something that we can't actually do in Streamtime, we will submit it to the back end of that roadmap where that piece of feedback or that user story is then linked to a feature or a piece of functionality. Now, when it comes to actually building and designing or choosing which of those things we'll do next, we kind of have to assess, the number of people that's going to impact and the amount of effort that's going to take on our behalf, because we have got limited resources here, so we need to be really selective with how we do that. Obviously, we try and identify quick wins, things we can bring through quite easily where we can, but designing a whole new feature or area of the product, for example, the job timeline, isn't something that we can just do overnight. So it takes a lot of work to kind of get all that stuff in, but we do sit down with our design and development team and we do a tech review of how long we think things will take, and that all kind of folds into the priority based on the number of people that will affect, the number of people that are asking for it, and how important that really is in the scheme of the product before we can go ahead and introduce it. So that's what that looks like. And so if you ever do pass feedback through, but if you don't hear back or it's been a while and you haven't seen an update happening, we try and please as many people as we can with the updates in Streamtime. But if something hasn't been introduced, it's likely that there simply aren't enough people asking for it to make through, or it's going to be a big piece of work, which is a high priority for us at the moment, because there's always new stuff that we could be doing and adding. There's a massive list of things to get through.
Yeah, well said. One feature can solve lots and lots of user stories and lots of problems. So we think twice before we release something. We want to make sure we solve as many problems as we can with just one feature.
Yeah, exactly. I think priorities is a great example of that, because it is so flexible and because there's so much what we can do here now. So priorities, especially since having added in these total things, these total columns, or these smart column totals, I should say. It's starting to answer reporting needs as well as just studio management needs, and we've also added the ability to include items in here as well, which is then kind of diving into being able to manage tasks and jobs better as well. So there's plenty more use here, and priorities is definitely an area that we're really excited to focus more on.
Yeah.
Cool. So there were a couple of questions that I noticed come through.
Michelle.
From Michelle, there was one which we answered, and there was another one which is referring to recurring tasks and whether or not we're working on it. So recurring tasks, I think you'll notice, is on the roadmap. It has been for a while, and it's something that lots of people have asked for before. Now, it is one of those ones which I understand is going to be very, very complex and difficult to build. And in the scheme of the priority, it's not something that we have. There are other things I think that we want to kind of get done before we kind of step back to recurring to-dos. We have got things that make it easier to get to-dos in quickly. I know, Michelle, that you've tried using that integration through Zapier. Google Calendar is a way of getting tasks automatically populating in your to-do screen. But also, being able to duplicate a to-do by holding down the Alt button and click.
Or even multi-select.
And multi-selecting to-dos, yep. And you can actually do that from the schedule too. So the to-do schedule, which is, this is new functionality that we've introduced. Let's say there's a task here. Maybe Polly's going to have to work on the concept development again next week, and I'm going to be working on that documentation. I can actually multi-select those and duplicate them. And then I can pull both of those tasks out to next week. So I can make a copy of them, duplicate them, and then pull them forward for both of those users. So all of that functionality, so being able to access the right-click menu, multi-select, duplicate, and move those tasks around are all kind of helping you get those jobs done faster too. And there was one which is probably a good place to finish on, which is Talia's asked if Streamtime is going to be releasing a time tracking feature. So we can actually say that, I think we are doing design work into timers at the moment and what a timer might look like in Streamtime. It's something that people have been asking for a while, and there's nothing which we can show you or confirm or release, but it is something that we're looking at internally here. So that's all I'll say on that, but watch this space. All right, thanks everyone, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.